David Richardson had everything money could buy. His company, Richardson Tech, was worth billions. He owned houses in 5 countries, drove cars that cost more than most people's homes, and his private jet was his pride and joy. But as he sat, in the leather seat of that same jet, holding his 6-month-old daughter Lucy, he felt completely lost. The phone call had come at 3 in the morning. His ex-wife had been rushed to the hospital with severe complications from a surgery. She would be fine, the doctors said, but she needed to stay for at least a week. The nanny couldn't travel on such short notice because her own mother was sick. David had an emergency board meeting in Tokyo that could save or destroy a deal worth hundreds of millions. He couldn't postpone it. So here he was, a man who commanded respect in boardrooms around the world, defeated by a tiny baby who weighed less than 15 pounds. The flight had started well enough. Lucy had been sleeping when they boarded. David thought this would be easy. He had handled billion-dollar mergers. How hard could one baby be? He settled into his usual spot, opened his laptop, and prepared for the long flight across the Pacific. That peaceful moment lasted exactly 23 minutes. Lucy woke up crying. Not the soft whimpers David had heard before when visiting his ex-wife. This was different. This was loud, angry crying that seemed to bounce off every surface of the aircraft. David picked her up awkwardly, the way he had seen others do it. The crying got louder. "It's okay," he whispered, though he had no idea if it actually was okay. "Daddy's here." The word felt strange in his mouth. He paid child support, yes. He saw Lucy every other weekend when his schedule allowed. But he had never really been alone with her for more than an hour. There had always been the nanny, or his ex-wife, or someone who actually knew what they were doing. He tried bouncing her gently. The crying continued. He tried walking up and down the narrow aisle of the jet. If anything, it got worse. Lucy's face was turning red, and her tiny fists were clenched tight. She looked angry at the world, and David couldn't blame her. Maybe she's hungry, he thought. The diaper bag was enormous, filled with bottles and formula and things David couldn't even identify. He managed to prepare a bottle the way he had seen it done before, testing the temperature on his wrist like he remembered from somewhere. But when he offered it to Lucy, she turned her head away and cried even harder. The sound was piercing. David's head started to pound. He could see the flight crew exchanging looks. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, asking if everything was all right. David wanted to say no, nothing was all right, but instead he just called back that they were fine. He wasn't fine. Lucy definitely wasn't fine. And this flight was going to last 14 hours. David tried everything he could think of. He changed her diaper, though he fumbled with the tabs and it took 3 tries to get it right. He tried singing, though he realized he didn't know any lullabies. He tried different positions, different voices, different everything. Nothing worked. By the time they had been in the air for 2 hours, David was sweating. His expensive shirt was wrinkled and stained with formula. His usually perfect hair was a mess from running his hands through it. Lucy showed no signs of getting tired. If anything, she seemed to be getting a second wind. The worst part was the helplessness. David was used to solving problems. When his company faced a crisis, he made calls, held meetings, found solutions. When competitors tried to undercut him, he outmaneuvered them. When the stock market crashed, he found opportunities others missed. But this tiny baby had him completely stumped. He tried calling his ex-wife, but the hospital said she was sedated and couldn't take calls. He tried calling the nanny, but she was dealing with her own family emergency. He even considered calling his own mother, but they barely spoke, and she had made it clear years ago that she thought he worked too much to be a good father. Maybe she was right. The crying was affecting everyone on the plane now. David could see the co-pilot looking back with concern. The flight attendants were whispering among themselves. He felt like he was failing, not just as a father, but as a human being. How could something so small make him feel so powerless? 3 hours into the flight, David was ready to turn the plane around. The important meeting in Tokyo seemed meaningless compared to this screaming child who needed something he couldn't give her. He had built an empire, but he couldn't comfort his own daughter. Lucy's cries had changed now. They were hoarse and desperate. She had been at this for so long that David worried she might be hurting herself. Her little body was rigid, her back arched, and no matter what he did, she wouldn't relax. That's when he noticed one of the flight attendants watching him. She was a woman in her 30s, with kind eyes and a concerned expression. She had been working quietly, bringing him water and checking on them, but now she was standing nearby, clearly wanting to help but unsure if she should interfere. David looked at her desperately. He was a proud man who rarely asked for help, but pride seemed stupid when his daughter was in distress. "I don't know what to do," he admitted, his voice barely audible over Lucy's cries. "I've tried everything." The flight attendant stepped closer. Her name tag read Patricia, and there was something about her presence that was immediately calming. Not to Lucy, who was still crying, but to David, who felt like he might break down himself. "Would you mind if I took a look?" Patricia asked gently. "I have some experience with babies." David nodded immediately. At this point, he would have handed Lucy over to anyone who thought they could help. Patricia moved closer, and David could see her studying Lucy carefully, not just looking but really observing. "How long has she been crying like this?" Patricia asked. "Almost 3 hours," David said, feeling like a failure just admitting it. Patricia nodded thoughtfully. "And when did she last eat?" David tried to remember. Everything was a blur. "I offered her a bottle when she first woke up, but she wouldn't take it. That was maybe 2.5 hours ago." "What about before the flight?" David realized he didn't know. The nanny had handed Lucy over at the airport, already strapped into her car seat, and David hadn't thought to ask about feeding schedules or sleep patterns or any of the things that probably mattered. "I'm not sure," he admitted. Patricia didn't judge him. She just nodded again, still watching Lucy with those careful, experienced eyes. "May I?" she asked, holding out her arms. David hesitated for just a moment. He barely knew this woman. But Lucy was still crying, and he was out of options. He carefully transferred his daughter into Patricia's arms, and something remarkable happened. Lucy didn't stop crying immediately, but something about Patricia's hold was different, more confident, more secure. David watched as Patricia adjusted Lucy's position, supporting her in a way that looked natural and practiced. "Let's see what we can figure out," Patricia said softly, and for the first time in hours, David felt a tiny spark of hope. Patricia held Lucy with the kind of confidence that comes from experience. She didn't rush or panic. Instead, she took her time, gently adjusting the baby's position while speaking in a soft, soothing voice. "There we go, sweet girl," she murmured. "Let's see what's bothering you." David watched in amazement as Patricia seemed to read Lucy like a book. She noticed things he had missed completely. The way Lucy's tiny fists were clenched, how she arched her back when she cried, the rigid way she held her little legs. "When you tried to feed her," Patricia asked, still holding Lucy, "did she seem like she wanted the bottle but couldn't take it? Or did she push it away completely?" David thought back. She turned her head away, but now that you mention it, she did seem frustrated, like she wanted something but couldn't figure out what. Patricia nodded. "And has anything changed in her routine lately? Different formula, different feeding schedule, anything like that?" This was exactly the kind of question David didn't know how to answer. He realized how little he actually knew about his daughter's daily life. "I'd have to call the nanny to find out," he admitted, feeling embarrassed. "That's okay," Patricia said kindly. "Let me try a few things first." She began moving Lucy in a slow, rhythmic pattern. Not the bouncing motion David had tried, but something more like a gentle dance. She held Lucy upright against her shoulder, supporting her head carefully, and started a soft, swaying motion. "Sometimes babies get uncomfortable when their digestion is off," Patricia explained as she moved. "If she's been switched to a new formula recently, or if her feeding schedule got disrupted, it can cause gas or reflux that makes them really fussy." David had never even considered that Lucy's crying might have a physical cause. He had assumed she was just unhappy or missing her mother. But watching Patricia work, he began to see that there was actually science behind what she was doing. My youngest used to get like this," Patricia continued, now gently patting Lucy's back in a specific rhythm. "The doctor said some babies are just more sensitive to changes. When their little tummies get upset, they can cry for hours because they don't know how to tell us what's wrong." Slowly, gradually, Lucy's cries began to change. They were still loud, but less desperate somehow. Patricia continued the gentle patting, counting softly under her breath. "There we go," she whispered. "That's a big girl." David couldn't believe what he was seeing. After hours of screaming, Lucy was a cow. Choli starting to calm down. Not completely, but enough that David could think clearly for the first time since takeoff. "How did you know to do that?" he asked. Patricia smiled. "Trial and error mostly. My 3 kids taught me more about babies than any book ever could. Each one was different, but they all had their signals if you knew how to look for them." She adjusted Lucy's position again, now holding her so that her head was slightly elevated. "See how she's not arching her back as much now? That usually means the pressure in her tummy is getting better." David was fascinated. He had never paid attention to these kinds of details before. To him, crying had just been crying. But Patricia was showing him that Lucy was actually communicating, just in a language he didn't understand. "Could you teach me?" he asked quietly. Patricia looked surprised. "Of course. Here, let me show you the position." She carefully transferred Lucy back to David, but this time she guided his arms and hands. "Support her head like this, keep her body upright and rock gently, not up and down, side to side like you're slow dancing." David felt awkward at first, but Patricia's instructions were clear and patient. Lucy was still fussing, but it was manageable now, more like complaining than screaming. "That's perfect," Patricia said encouragingly. "Now try the patting, gentle but firm, right between her shoulder blades. Count to 3 between each pat." David followed her instructions. 1, 2, 3, pat. 1, 2, 3, pat. It felt strange at first, but then he started to get into the rhythm. Lucy's fussing quieted even more. "I can't believe this is working," David said. "Babies are smarter than we give them credit for," Patricia replied. "They know when someone is calm and confident. You were stressed before and she could feel that. Now you're more relaxed and so is she." It was true. David did feel more relaxed. For the first time since becoming a father, he felt like he might actually be able to figure this out. Patricia had given him something more valuable than just a way to stop the crying. She had given him confidence. "The thing about babies," Patricia continued, "is that they don't need you to be perfect. They just need you to care enough to keep trying. And it's obvious that you care about her very much." David wasn't sure that was true. He cared about Lucy, yes. But he had always assumed that caring meant providing for her financially, making sure she had the best of everything money could buy. It had never occurred to him that she might need something simpler from him. "I don't really know how to be a father," he admitted. "I work all the time. I've probably spent more time in this airplane than in her nursery." Patricia didn't judge him. "It's never too late to learn. And the fact that you're here with her now, trying to figure it out, that says a lot." Lucy had finally settled into a peaceful quiet. She wasn't asleep yet, but she wasn't crying either. She was just lying in David's arms, looking around with those big, curious baby eyes. "She's beautiful," Patricia said softly. "She looks like her mother," David replied, then realized that wasn't quite true anymore. Looking at Lucy now, really. Looking at her, he could see his own features in her face, the shape of her eyes, the way her mouth curved when she was concentrating. "She has your determination," Patricia observed with a smile. The way she was crying before, she wasn't giving up. She was going to keep trying until someone understood what she needed. David laughed, surprising himself. "That does sound familiar." They spent the next hour talking quietly while Lucy dozed in David's arms. Patricia shared stories about her own children, and David found himself asking questions he had never thought to ask before. How did you know when babies were hungry versus tired? What did different types of cries mean? How did you balance work and parenting when there never seemed to be enough time for either? The honest truth, Patricia said. You don't balance it, you just do your best each day and hope it adds up to enough. Some days you're a great parent but terrible at work. Some days it's the opposite. The goal isn't perfection, it's just showing up. David thought about all the times he had chosen work over time with Lucy. Important meetings, business trips, late nights at the office. He had told himself he was building something for her future, but now he wondered if he was just building excuses. I've been showing up to the wrong places, he said quietly. Patricia looked at him with understanding. It's not too late to change that. Lucy stirred in his arms, making soft baby noises. David adjusted his hold the way Patricia had taught him, and Lucy settled back down immediately. Such a small thing, but it felt like a victory. Thank you, David said to Patricia. I don't know what I would have done without your help. You would have figured it out eventually, she replied. Sometimes we just need someone to show us that we're capable of more than we think. As the plane continued across the ocean, David found himself looking forward to the rest of the flight. Not because he was eager to get to Tokyo and his business meeting, but because he was curious to learn more. About Lucy, about parenting, and about this remarkable woman who had turned his crisis into an opportunity. For the first time in his adult life, David Richardson was more interested in the journey than the destination. With Lucy finally peaceful in his arms, David found himself in an unfamiliar situation. For the first time in years, he wasn't rushing to the next meeting or checking his phone every few minutes. He was just sitting quietly, holding his daughter and talking to someone who had shown him kindness when he needed it most. Patricia had returned to her duties, but during her breaks, she came back to check on them. Each time, she brought a different insight or suggestion that helped David feel more confident. She showed him how to tell if Lucy was getting hungry by the way she moved her mouth. She explained why babies sometimes fought sleep even when they were exhausted. She taught him the difference between a pick-me-up cry and an something's wrong cry. You're a natural at this, David said during one of their conversations. How many children do you have? Patricia's face lit up with pride. 3. My oldest is 15. Then I have a 12-year-old and my baby just turned 8 last month. That must keep you busy, David said, thinking about how challenging just one baby was. Busy is one word for it, Patricia laughed. Chaotic might be more accurate, but they're good kids. They've had to grow up faster than I would have liked, but they help each other out. David noticed something in her tone when she said they had to grow up fast. It's just you raising them? Patricia nodded. Their father left when the youngest was 2, said he didn't sign up for all the responsibility. She shrugged, but David could see the old hurt in her eyes. His loss, really. He's missing out on watching them become amazing people. David felt a stab of recognition. Wasn't he missing out on the same thing with Lucy? He might not have left physically, but how present had he really been? What are they like? He asked, genuinely curious. Patricia's whole demeanor changed as she talked about her children. The tiredness in her eyes was replaced by warmth and pride. My oldest, Tony, he's the serious one. Gets straight A's, wants to be an engineer. He's already taking college-level math courses online because his school ran out of classes to challenge him. The middle one, Ashley, she's my artist, always drawing or making something. She sees beauty in everything, even when things are tough. And little Michael, he's my heart. He's the one who notices when someone's sad and tries to make them feel better. David could hear the love in her voice, but he also heard something else. Worry, maybe? They sound incredible, he said. They are, Patricia agreed. But I worry about them sometimes. Tony is so smart and he works so hard, but college is expensive. He's already talking about getting a job instead of applying to universities, because he doesn't want me to stress about the money. What about scholarships? David asked. He's applying for everything he can find, Patricia said. But there's so much competition, and even with a scholarship there are still costs. Books, housing, all those little things that add up. David found himself doing mental math. The watch on his wrist cost more than most people's annual salary. The wine in his private cellar was worth more than a college education. It was strange to think about those numbers while talking to someone who was worried about textbook costs. And Ashley's asthma medication is expensive, Patricia continued. Insurance covers some of it, But not all. Some months I have to choose. Between the name brand inhaler that works best for her and keeping the lights on. David felt something shift inside him. He had always known that people struggled financially, but it had been an abstract concept. Numbers on reports about unemployment or poverty rates. But sitting here talking to Patricia, it became real in a way it had never been before. "You work 2 jobs?" he asked, remembering something she had mentioned earlier. "Flight attendant during the day, nurse at night," Patricia confirmed. "I got my nursing degree before the kids were born, but when their father left, I needed something with more flexible hours. This job lets me be home more often, even if it means less money." "You're a nurse too?" David was impressed. "That's incredible," Patricia shrugged modestly. "I love helping people. That's why I noticed what was wrong with Lucy so quickly. I see a lot of sick babies at the hospital." David realized that Patricia wasn't just naturally good with children, and she was professionally trained to understand medical issues, to read signs and symptoms, to stay calm in emergencies. No wonder she had been able to help when he couldn't. "Do you miss it? Nursing, full-time, I mean." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "Every day," she said finally. "I mean, I love this job too, and the flexibility is important for my family. But nursing, that's my calling. When I see a patient get better, when I can help someone through their worst day, that's when I feel most like myself." "Why can't you go back to it?" "Single mother with 3 kids," Patricia said simply. "Nursing means long shifts, nights, weekends, holidays. I can't leave the kids alone that much, and I can't afford childcare for the hours I'd need to work." David found himself thinking about his own situation. He had a nanny, housekeepers, assistants, all kinds of people to handle the practical parts of life so he could focus on work. Patricia was doing everything herself. "Your mother helps?" he asked, remembering she had mentioned family. Patricia's expression grew sad. "Mom tries, but she's got diabetes and it's been getting worse. Some days she can barely take care of herself, let alone help with the kids. I worry about her constantly." "What about her medical care?" "She lost her insurance when she had to retire early because of the diabetes. The medication she needs cost more than her whole Social Security check some months. I help when I can, but—" Patricia trailed off, and David could see the weight of all these responsibilities pressing down on her. He was starting to understand that Patricia's kindness to him and Lucy wasn't just natural generosity. It was who she was, despite carrying burdens that would crush most people. She spent her days taking care of passengers, her nights taking care of patients, and every other moment taking care of her family. And she still had compassion left over for a stressed-out billionaire who didn't know how to comfort his own child. Lucy stirred in David's arms, and without thinking, he automatically adjusted her position the way Patricia had shown him. Lucy settled back down immediately. "Look at that," Patricia said with a smile. "You're getting the hang of this." "I had a good teacher," David replied. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching clouds pass by the airplane window. David found himself thinking about the meeting waiting for him in Tokyo. 6 months ago, it had seemed like the most important thing in the world. Now he wasn't so sure. "Can I ask you something?" Patricia said eventually. "Of course." "What's it like, having so much money that you don't have to worry about things like medical bills or college tuition?" David considered the question seriously. "Honestly, I never really thought about it before today. I grew up with money, so I guess I just assumed everyone figured out a way to pay for what they needed. I know that sounds naive." "It doesn't sound naive," Patricia said. "It sounds fortunate, but also maybe a little lonely." "Lonely? When you don't have to depend on other people, you don't get to experience the kind of connections that come from helping each other through tough times. My neighbors and I were constantly helping each other out, watching each other's kids, sharing food when money's tight, giving rides when someone's car breaks down. It creates bonds." David thought about his own life. He had business associates, not friends. He had employees, not helpers. When he needed something, he hired someone to provide it. When someone needed something from him, it was usually money or a business favor. "I never thought of it that way," he said. That's why today was probably good for you, Patricia said gently. You got to experience what it's like to really need help and have someone give it freely. Not because you paid them, but because they cared. She was right. David couldn't remember the last time someone had helped him without wanting something. In return, Patricia had solved his problem not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Because she saw a father struggling with his child and her instinct was to help, not to judge. You could have just ignored us, David said. Let me figure it out. On my own. I could never ignore a crying baby, Patricia replied. But more than that, I could never ignore someone who was clearly trying their best but just didn't know what to do. You love her. That was obvious from the start. You just needed some guidance. Lucy made a soft cooing sound, and both adults looked down at her. She was awake now, looking around with bright, curious eyes. When she saw David looking at her, she smiled. It was the first time David had ever seen his daughter smile at him, and it felt like the most important business deal he had ever closed. As their conversation deepened over the remaining hours of the flight, David found himself seeing the world through completely different eyes. Patricia's stories about her children, her struggles, and her dreams painted a picture of life that was both harder and richer than anything he had ever experienced. When she told him about Tony staying up late helping his younger siblings with homework after finishing his own advanced coursework, David thought about his own teenage years spent at expensive private schools, where his biggest worry was which Ivy League university to attend. When she described Ashley selling her artwork at local fairs to help buy school supplies, David remembered his own childhood art classes in private studios with renowned teachers, where money was never a consideration. When she talked about little Michael's kindness despite having so little materially, David wondered what kind of person he might have become if he had learned generosity from necessity rather than tax benefits. You've raised remarkable children, David said as Lucy dozed peacefully in his arms. They've raised themselves mostly, Patricia replied with typical modesty. I just try to keep them safe and loved. Don't sell yourself short, David said. What you've accomplished as a single mother, working 2 jobs, taking care of your own mother, that's more impressive than anything I've ever done. Patricia looked surprised. You built $1 billion company. I inherited $1 million company and had every advantage imaginable, David corrected. The best schools, unlimited resources, connections, safety nets. You started with nothing and created a loving family while helping other people every single day. That's real success. They were interrupted by the pilot's voice announcing their descent into Tokyo. David felt a strange reluctance to land. This flight had been more meaningful than any business trip he could remember. Patricia, he said suddenly, can I ask you something that might sound strange? Sure. If money wasn't an issue, what would you want most for your family? Patricia thought for a moment. That's easy. I'd want Tony to be able to go to college without worrying about the cost. I'd want Ashley to have proper art supplies and maybe lessons with a real teacher. I'd want Michael to keep being the sweet, generous kid he is without having to grow up too fast because mom's always stressed about money. And for yourself? I'd want to go back to nursing full-time, she said without hesitation. I'd want to finish my degree. I'm actually just 1 semester short of my bachelor's. And I'd want my mom to have the medical care she needs without it bankrupting either of us. David nodded, his mind working. What if I told you that I could make all of that happen? Patricia stiffened slightly. I hope you're not suggesting what I think you're suggesting, because I need you to understand I helped you today because that's who I am, not because I wanted anything from you. I know that, David said quickly. That's exactly why I want to help. You didn't ask for anything. You just saw someone who needed help and you gave it freely. When was the last time someone did that for you? Patricia was quiet for a long moment. I can't remember, she finally admitted. I've been thinking about what you said earlier about connections and community. You're right, I've been lonely without even realizing it. Today, taking care of Lucy with your help, actually talking to someone about real things instead of just business. This is the most human I've felt in years. The plane was descending now, and David could see the lights of Tokyo beginning to appear below them. I want to offer you something, he continued. But I want to do it in a way that doesn't insult your independence or make you feel like charity case, because that's not what this is. Patricia waited, curious but cautious. My company has been looking for someone to head up our employee wellness program. It's a new position. We've realized that we need to do better by our workers, especially the ones with families. The job would involve developing programs for healthcare support, childcare assistance, educational opportunities for employees' children. It would require someone with medical training, experience with real-world family challenges, and the ability to understand what working parents actually need. Patricia's eyes widened as she realized what he was suggesting. It would pay well. Enough that you could quit your second job, David continued. The hours would be regular business hours, so you could be home with your kids. And one of the first benefits we'd implement would be education assistance, both for employees finishing their degrees and for their children. David, Patricia said quietly, you don't have to do this. I'm not doing it because I have to, he replied. I'm doing it because it makes sense. You'd be perfect for this job. You understand healthcare, you understand the challenges working parents face, and you have the kind of compassion and practical wisdom that our company has been missing. This isn't charity. This is me trying to hire the best person for a job that desperately needs doing. Patricia was struggling with the offer, he could see. Her pride was warring with her practical needs. Think about it, David said gently. You'd be helping hundreds of families, maybe thousands. You'd be using your nursing background to make a real difference in people's lives. And yes, it would solve your financial worries, but more importantly, it would let you do work that matters to you. What about Tony's college? Patricia asked quietly. Our educational assistance program would cover it completely, along with programs for Ashley's art education and anything else your kids need to reach their potential. And my mother's medical care? Our healthcare benefits would cover dependents. Your mother would have access to the best doctors and any medications she needs. Patricia was crying now quietly, trying not to wake Lucy. I don't understand why you're doing this. Because today, you showed me what I've been missing my whole life, David said simply. Genuine human connection. Kindness without expectation. The feeling of actually being useful to someone who needed help. You gave me that gift. Now I want to give you the chance to do work that fulfills you without having to sacrifice your family's well-being. The plane touched down smoothly, and David realized that his important business meeting was the last thing on his mind. All he could think about was whether Patricia would accept his offer and what it might mean for both their families. I need time to think, Patricia said finally. Of course. Take all the time you need. I'll give you my direct number, and you can call me when you've decided. But Patricia, I want you to know, whether you take this job or not, today changed my life. You taught me how to be a father. More than that, you reminded me how to be human. As they prepared to disembark, David looked down at Lucy, who was awake and alert in his arms. She seemed perfectly content now, and he realized that he felt the same way. For the first time in his adult life, he was exactly where he wanted to be, holding exactly who mattered most, surrounded by the kind of genuine connection he had never known he was missing. The meeting in Tokyo would happen. The business would continue, but David Richardson was no longer the same man who had boarded this plane in panic 14 hours ago. He was a father now, in the truest sense. And he had Patricia to thank for showing him the way. 6 months later, David's life looked completely different than it had before that fateful flight to Tokyo. The most obvious change was in his office, at Richardson Tech, where a corner had been converted into a small play area. Lucy spent several hours there each day, and David had become skilled at conducting meetings while occasionally soothing a fussy baby or helping her with her toys. His business associates had been shocked at first. David Richardson, the man who used to schedule bathroom breaks, was now the CEO who sometimes had to pause conference calls because his daughter needed attention. But what surprised everyone, including David himself, was that he had become more effective, not less. I think clearer now, he explained to his longtime friend and business partner Robert as they reviewed quarterly reports while Lucy played quietly on a blanket nearby. I don't waste time on things that don't really matter anymore. It was true. The deals that used to consume weeks of his attention now got resolved in days because David could see more clearly what was essential and what was just noise. His decision-making had improved because he was thinking not just about profit margins, but about the kind of company he wanted Lucy to inherit someday. The biggest change, though, was in the company culture itself. Patricia had accepted his job offer after 2 weeks of careful consideration and several long conversations with her children. She had started as director of employee wellness and had quickly become one of David's most valued advisors. Her first initiative had been a comprehensive childcare program. Richardson Tech now provided on-site daycare for employees' children, emergency backup care for when regular arrangements fell through, and flexible scheduling that allowed parents to attend school events and medical appointments without using vacation time. "You should see the difference it's made," Patricia told David as they walked through the company's new Family Resource Center. "Employee satisfaction is up 40%, and turnover in our entry-level positions has dropped to almost nothing." "And productivity?" David asked, though he already knew the answer. "Higher than ever. Turns out when people aren't stressed about their children's well-being, they can focus better at work." The Education Assistance Program had been Patricia's second major project. It provided tuition support for employees finishing their degrees, college scholarships for their children, and partnerships with local schools to improve educational opportunities in the community. Tony had been one of the first beneficiaries. He was now thriving at MIT, studying engineering just as he had dreamed. His grades were excellent, and he had called David personally to thank him for the opportunity. "I know you didn't have to do this," Tony had said during their conversation. "Mom explained that you helped because you wanted to, not because you had to. That means everything to our family." Ashley was flourishing too. With proper art supplies and lessons with a professional instructor, her talent had bloomed in ways that amazed everyone. Her latest painting hung in the lobby of Richardson Tech's headquarters, a vibrant portrait of children from different backgrounds playing together, symbolizing the company's commitment to community. Little Michael had surprised everyone by becoming Lucy's favorite babysitter. At 9 years old, he had a natural gift with babies and often came to the office after school to help Patricia watch Lucy during late meetings. The sight of the serious little boy carefully teaching Lucy how to stack blocks had become a favorite among the employees. But perhaps the most meaningful change was in Patricia's mother, Mrs. Rodriguez. With proper medical care and the right medications, her diabetes was now well controlled. She had regained much of her energy and had become Lucy's honorary grandmother, spending hours teaching her Spanish songs and helping with her care. Abuela Rosa, as Lucy had started calling her, had also become a beloved figure at Richardson Tech. She volunteered in the company garden that Patricia had started, teaching employees about traditional herbs and remedies. Her gentle wisdom and practical knowledge had enriched the workplace in ways no one had anticipated. David found himself spending more and more time in the wellness center that Patricia had created. It wasn't just because of the excellent coffee and comfortable furniture. It was because this was where the real heart of his company beat now. This was where employees brought their concerns, where families gathered for company events, where real human connections formed. "Remember when you used to eat lunch alone in your office every day?" Patricia teased him one afternoon as they watched Lucy play with other employees' children in the center's playground. "I remember thinking I was too busy for lunch," David replied. "Now I realize I was just too busy for life." The changes weren't limited to the office. David had completely restructured his personal schedule. He worked from home 2 days a week, spent every weekend with Lucy, and had hired a part-time nanny who understood that her job was to support his parenting, not replace it. He had also reconnected with his own mother, who had been amazed by the transformation in her son. Their relationship, strained for years by David's workaholic tendencies, had healed as she watched him become the kind of father she had always hoped he could be. "You're different," she had told him during a recent visit. Softer somehow, but also stronger. The business results spoke for themselves. Richardson Tech had its most profitable year ever, but more importantly, it had been recognized as one of the best companies to work for in the country. Other S's were studying their employee wellness programs, and David had started consulting with other CEOs about how to create more family-friendly workplaces. The secret, he would tell them, is to hire people who understand what families actually need, not what you think they need, and then trust them to build something better than you could imagine. On the anniversary of their flight to Tokyo, David and Patricia took Lucy to the airport to watch planes take off and land. It had become a tradition, their way of remembering the day that changed everything. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't helped us that day?" David asked as they sat on a bench watching Lucy chase bubbles that Patricia was blowing. "I don't really think about alternative histories," Patricia replied. "But I do think about how one moment of kindness can ripple out in ways we never expect. Lucy's going to grow up thinking this is normal," David observed, watching his daughter laugh as she tried to catch the bubbles. Having a workplace where families matter, having friends from all different backgrounds, seeing adults who take care of each other. That's the best gift we could give her, Patricia agreed. A world where compassion is just part of how things work. David thought about the man he had been a year ago, successful by every external measure, but disconnected from everything that actually mattered. He had thought success meant having enough money to solve any problem, but he had learned that real success meant having the wisdom to see what problems were worth solving and the relationships that made the solutions meaningful. Lucy ran over, to them breathless and giggling, her chubby hands reaching for more bubbles. David picked her up and spun her around, delighting in her squeals of joy. A year ago, he wouldn't have known how to make her laugh. Now, her happiness was the measure by which he judged every decision. "Thank you," he said to Patricia, as he had said so many times over the past year. "Thank you," she replied, as she always did, "for showing me that sometimes dreams really do come true, especially when you least expect them." As they walked back to the car, Lucy babbling happily in David's arms, he thought about the meeting in Tokyo that had seemed so important a year ago. He couldn't even remember now what deal they had been negotiating, but he would never forget the flight that taught him the difference between having everything and having what mattered. The billionaire CEO had learned the most valuable lesson of his life from a flight attendant who had nothing to give but everything that counted, and in return, he had discovered that the greatest business success was creating a world where kindness was not just possible, but profitable.